Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from fantasyfootballscout.co.uk. My name is David and today we're going to have a look at something a little bit different. We're going to take a look at the current leader of FPL in the entire world. That is the person ranked number one after the first 8 game weeks, to see if there's any lessons we can learn about their team and about their strategy so far that we could perhaps implement in our teams. Now, normally at this stage of the season, we can't often see people top of the pile having done some really odd and wacky things, or perhaps maybe deployed all of their chips in one fell swoop between the first 4 game weeks. It's not quite the same story with the current leader. There are, of course, a couple of those little bits and bobs thrown in there, but it makes for certainly makes for interesting viewing. So I thought I'd share that with you guys today. Before I go into that, just a quick reminder, of course, that you can still save up to 30% on those pre-season prices for the Fantasy Football Scout members area. Is still available, so make sure you take advantage of that going into Game Week 9. The international break is a perfect opportunity to delve into that for the first time when there's not as much Premier League football on. It's a good way to fill the time and educate yourself about your team and the players that you do or don't have. Now, what about the players that our current leader does and does not have? Well, what we've got on the screen right now is the current team of the world number one, which is Seher from Greece, who has 611 points, got 76 of those in game week 8 when he played his free hit. Now, what's really interesting about his free hit is that he actually only made about 4 changes on this. So this is actually very similar to his current team. So we got 6 points from Turner in goal, 6 for Udogie, 1 for Robertson, and of course now it looks like he's going to be injured for a little while. Cash 2 points, 9 points for White, 15 for Salah, 16 for Sterling, 12 for Maddison because he captained Maddison. Luis Diaz and Bruno Fernandes got 2 points each, 5 points for Watkins, and a bench of Areola, Awoniyi, Ruben Diaz, and Julian Alvarez. So I did promise some odd-looking decisions, but they're certainly paying off for Seher, who is, of course, leading the way at the moment. He has already played his wildcard, but that doesn't necessarily have to be, in any sense, a mitigating factor here, because lots of us have played our wildcards. And what's really of note here, of course, is that that wildcard involved him not going with Erling Haaland. So we'll come on to that in a little bit. But first things first, let's have a look at the journey of Seher's season so far to really get a feel for what the season's been like for him, and we'll go into the decisions in a minute. So in game week 1, 82 points, which we'll see in a minute, was from a team that did not look dissimilar from what I would describe as a sort of template team for those of us who are describing ourselves as the more engaged managers. That's someone who I would say listens to content or watches content and perhaps engages in discussion either on Fantasy Football Scout's website or another form of social media. So his team was very, very similar to that, and we'll have a look at that in just a minute. So 82 points, 464k after game week 1, then 60 points in game week 2, put him up to 219k. 85 points in game week 3, up to 899. 86 points in game week 4, took him up to 421st. A little bit of a poor game week in game week 5, I think it was. Yeah, game week 5. 37 points, dropped down to 3.4k. the doldrums of 3.4k. Then 108 points in game week 6, took him all the way up to 57th. And in those 6 game weeks, no chips were used. It was then game week 7 where that wildcard came into play, which is not really that far off where a lot of people have been using their wildcard. So, as I said, not all of this strategy is like completely bonkers. It's not that far off what some of us have been doing, which I think is encouraging in many ways. That's part of why I'm doing this video, is have a look at some of the things that he's done, and they're not that dissimilar from some of the things we've been talking about. So, yeah, up to 57th, then 77 points after that 108 points, up to 57. So he wildcarded after he got 108 points, which I actually like that. Wildcarding from a position of strength is really cool, especially when you're 57th in the world, up to 18th. And then with that free hit in game week 8, took him from 18th to 1st. And the thing is, you might turn around and say, oh, well, he's already played 2 of his chips, that's why he's doing so well. Well, it's not just about that, because if you take a game week 8 out of the situation and you just look at game weeks 1 through 7 and just point out the fact that he's only the only chip he's used there is a wild card, to be 18th in the world, still also very impressive. So there's definitely lots of things we can learn about from this team, and so let's have a look at some of those now. So the really interesting thing here is actually that outside of those 2 chips, Seher has actually only made 4 transfers all season. I thought that was a mistake when I looked at it. I double checked it with my team. I've not played my wild card yet, but of course your wild card transfers are not included in your team transfer count for the season. I've made 8. And Seher's only made 4. So potential strength in being somewhat patient with your team in many respects. So one transfer made in game week 2, swapping Mings out and getting cash in. Game week 3, he sold Alexander-Arnold and brought in Udogie. Game week 4, he sold Diaby and brought in Son to good effect, which we'll see in a minute. Game week 5, Lamptey left the team and in came Dan Burn. No transfers made for game week 6. Then he played his wild card despite the fact that he had 2 free transfers for that game week. So yeah, an incredible bit of strategy going on here, to be honest. Really, really interesting. And of course, yeah, those numbers that you'll see up above relating to those 2 chips aren't included in that. So let's break it down and have a look at some of the players that he's owned and try and work out why he has done so well. And what we're going to discover is that a lot of this has come down to captaincy strategy. And in a world where Haaland has really dominated the captaincy, what we've seen from Saher in the first 8 game weeks of the season is that you can make real gains if you go against Haaland, but you've got to do it in the right week. You've got to do it when it looks like that's going to be rewarding. We have done a video actually on whether or not you should go with or without Haaland on the YouTube channel, or if you're accessing this as a podcast, you can find that there as well. Talked about that in greater length, and yeah, Saher doesn't have him at the moment. Whether or not that's going to bode well in the coming weeks is hard to say, but we certainly still have to applaud the effort that he's made over the first 8 game weeks. And to be honest, even getting into the top 5k with Haaland in the team in the first half of the season, there's clearly things outside of Haaland that he's done that worked well. And yeah, captaincy is one of them. Although in game week 1, as I promised you, his team not dissimilar from what you would describe as a template team at the start of the season. So Onana in goal, James, Alexander-Arnold and Estupiñán were his back 3. His substitute defenders were Mings and Lamptey. Then we had Matoma, Saka, Foden, Bruno Fernandes and Diaby as the midfield. Haaland up front. He was captain to game week 1. Visser instead of Mbeumo, and then Awoniyi on the bench. Which didn't last long because Awoniyi started to do some really interesting things for Saher in the coming game week. So let's move to game week 2. What happened in game week 2? Well, this is where we start to see him go differently from Haaland. And it didn't always work because in game week 2, Haaland admittedly did blank. However, Alexander-Arnold also blanked and he was his captain that week. But the team made up for it in other areas. Estupiñán hauled. His immediate replacement for Tyrone Mings and Matty Cash got 6 points. Matoma got 12. And we saw Awoniyi coming into the starting 11 to get 7. He has had, and Foden got 9 points as well. He did have some benching issues because, of course, you can see Visser's there on the bench with 11 points in game week 2. But yeah, making decent progress in those first 2 game weeks. Game week 3 saw even more success. Alexander-Arnold out for Udogie, so 12 points off Udogie, 17 for Cash. Onana still delivering some points. Diaby getting 12 points. Foden getting 4. Awoniyi delivering again, but this time on the bench. But crucially, what happened here is that Saher was really hell-bent on trying for some Haaland alternatives, and it really paid off here. This, I think, was the Sheffield United game for Man City, where he only got 4 points because he missed the penalty, but then scored. Bruno Fernandes got 12 points in that home win over Nottingham Forest, and he captained him, 24 points. So a lot of that ground was made up there. Now, that was obviously a counter-cultural decision at the time, but is it completely ludicrous? Not really. You're captaining a top 6 player who's got a good history at Old Trafford against a team that last season were poor away from home, and he clearly very objectively saw that as an opportunity to go against Haaland, and it worked. Game week 4, he went back to Haaland, but he came close to not going with Haaland in the sense that he vice-captained Son, who also... But what I mean is it was much of a muchness because both Haaland and Son got 20 points. Most of his points came from those guys because you see Cash on negative points, Saka on 4. The rest of the team didn't perform too well, but having Son and Haaland and captaining him helped. And we should just clarify, whilst I'm praising him for not captaining Haaland some of the time, I'm going to praise him for also captaining Haaland some of the time, rather than being staunchly against Haaland, almost out of principle, which we've seen with some people. Very much took the approach clearly that sometimes he'll captain him, sometimes he won't when he sees there's an opportunity, and so far that's worked out. In game week 5, that was the difficult game week. Haaland didn't do very well. Awoniyi came back in to the starting 11 but only got 5 points. He captained Son for that blank in game week 5. Dan Burn came in this week and got 6 points. Bit of a damp squib, dropped down to 3.4k, but game week 6, wow, what a game week. The strategy here paid off again by going against Haaland, and it worked. He got Son captaincy, came off, still got Bruno, double figures there, double figures for Saka, double figures for Foden, double figures for Matoma. as I said, that midfield is not really all that far off what you would describe as template. And so it's really interesting to see that if you have... There's a number of players on the template if you have the right ones. And also that you're patient with them as well. It can pay off because, as we already established, only 4 transfers made in the first 6 game weeks. I think basically none of them really changed his midfield too much. He's had a lot of faith with the players he started the season with, and just holding on to some of those players has paid dividends. For example, Foden, I sold him in game week 6 to get to... it wasn't Son, can't remember why I moved him to now. But I sold him. I thought I'm done with him. And that was the week he got a double figure haul. So, yeah, real show of patience here has been rewarded. We often say in FPL sometimes we wish we were more patient, and it can pay off. 108 points. And so this was even before any chips came into play. We had Dan Burn on 12 points. So Nana's still delivering on 7. You know, he showed enormous patience with Nana, and it did pay off. So, yeah, that's what it would look like going into game week 7. That's when the wild card came along. Some relatively interesting picks here. The biggest, of course, is no Haaland. Ben White, 14 points. Areola's come in now. He's got Areola and Turner as a goalkeeper combination. So, again, it's not crazy stuff. That's very close to what most wildcarders who are engaged managers will be looking at. The decision really was to go with Salah here for this period, which didn't provide instant rewards, but did in just a second. Sterling's come in. Erdegaard's come in for Saka, which was to great effect. 17 points in this particular game week. And, of course, he also wildcarded in Watkins. Front line of Watkins and Jesus. Got 5 points for Jesus, 23 points for Watkins. That almost instant success, to be honest. And Amunyihi, still there. I mean, I'm still looking at around game week 9-10, maybe when their fixtures get nicer, I might go for him. So nice to see some faith in Amunyihi on the bench. Of course. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to be bringing him in around that time. I need confirmation on that injury first. So, he is currently out at the moment, but the current number 1 still keeping the faith for now. The free hit is the one I find the most interesting. We'll just go back to the transfers page because that's where we can see the transfers he made on that free hit. Estupiñán, Jesus, Erdegaard and Foden were replaced with Diaz, Maddison, Alvarez and Robertson. And that was it. This is probably the wackiest thing about this team. I would love to. I mean, if you watch our videos, then please get in the comments and explain this free hit, because I mean it worked. I'm not sitting here criticizing it. I've just never seen anything like it. To play a free hit at this stage in the season and only make a few changes is, I find, really fascinating. So, yeah, 6 points for Turner, 6 points for Udogie, 9 points for White. Salah finally delivering 15. Sterling also delivering on 16. Diaz and Fernandes less so. Watkins not delivering either. But Maddison getting something, and he was the captain here. So he's very much followed the crowd in many ways, and I don't mean that as a criticism. Like a lot of people did, they looked in that Spurs fixture and quite liked it. And in another world where there's no red card, Maddison may well have done better than he did. So yeah, really interesting to see there the decisions that have been made by this current leading manager. And certainly going to keep an eye on how his team gets on. I think without Haaland, it might be a bit of a challenge, but certainly the lessons we can learn from that team over the first 8 games, which show that patience can be rewarded sometimes. Also worth saying that you're never too far away from being sat there with a team that can propel up the rankings, because I look at a lot of those lineups and they don't seem completely bonkers to me. They seem not dissimilar from the sort of teams I see posted on Fantasy Football Scout in the comment section every day, or on social media channels, or sort of some of the templates that I've seen around. And yeah, going into other places with those captaincies, as and when you feel the opportunity is there, can be very successful if you get it right. Whether or not that's going to be true for the next 8 game weeks is hard to tell, because Man City, we sort of expect them to kind of come back with a bang. But if we do get inklings that maybe certain other assets might be more rewarding than Haaland, then Saher's season so far shows that if you are brave, sometimes it can pay off. So it's worth keeping that in mind. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. As I said, it's a little bit different to the sort of thing that we usually do. So yeah, let us know. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button and hit the bell notification if you don't want to miss anything else. The international break is a good time to hit that notification bell, because then it means you won't miss anything. So yeah, with that, I shall leave you fine folks to enjoy the rest of that international break, and I shall see you next time. Bye.